Across the expanse of North America, the flag of the European Union waves, seemingly challenging established norms. Is Canada truly preparing to shift its political allegiance, trading its familiar proximity to the United States for membership in the European family? Why would a nation with a robust economy and abundant natural resources take such a radical step? Rumors of Canada's potential entry into the EU are increasingly circulating in political circles. The new Prime Minister is expected to call a snap election following a visit to the Governor-General. Simultaneously, threats emanating from Washington towards its northern neighbor cast doubt on Canada's sovereignty. But is Canada ready to become the 28th member of the EU? What would be the economic and political ramifications of this decision? How would it impact the global balance of power, and what do Canadians themselves think about it? Canada and Europe have long been connected not only geographically but also historically. A universal healthcare system, deeply ingrained bilingualism, and enduring ties to the monarchy distinctly set Canada apart from other North American nations, bringing it closer to the European model. In recent years, marked by challenging relations with Washington, Ottawa has intensified efforts to seek new commercial and strategic allies. In this context, the European Union appears as a particularly attractive partner for Canada. Ottawa's interest in the EU is driven by a range of factors, including free trade agreements, customs preferences, and expanded access to the European market. Canada's pursuit of closer engagement with Europe did not arise in a vacuum. Tariff disputes, diplomatic disagreements, and tensions in the Arctic region, particularly pronounced during Donald Trump's presidency, prompted Ottawa to diversify its foreign policy ties. The European Union, with its economic potential, commitment to shared values, and stability, has become a promising avenue for Canada. After years of close collaboration with Brussels, including through the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, Ottawa is increasingly questioning the possibility of further deepening relations. The prospect of closer integration with Europe is becoming a subject of active debate in Canadian political circles. In an era of global uncertainty, the question of sovereignty and integration is particularly acute. While some caution against the loss of national identity, others see closer ties with Europe as a guarantee of stability and prosperity. In this context, Canada's accession to the European Union could be more than just an important step, it could be a real breakthrough for both sides. Following Brexit, when the EU lost a key economic player, the arrival of such a powerful partner as Canada could breathe new life into transatlantic trade. With its abundant energy resources and developed defense sector, Canada could become an indispensable ally for Europe, especially in areas where the EU has the greatest need. In particular, Canada could play a crucial role in realizing Europe's ambitious plans to increase defense spending. Under the new $150 billion defense fund, EU member states are strongly encouraged to procure a certain proportion of armaments. Here, Canadian industry with its technological and manufacturing capabilities could become a reliable partner for European defense companies. It should not be forgotten that Canada's rapprochement with the EU is also driven by challenging relations with the United States, especially during Donald Trump's presidency. The protectionist trade policies of the United States created serious challenges for the Canadian economy, pushing the country to seek new allies and markets. Donald Trump's once expressed idea of turning Canada into the 51st state of America, coupled with the unleashed trade wars, forced Ottawa to seek new paths and alternative partnerships. A symbol of the change, of course, was the first foreign visit of the newly elected Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who immediately after his inauguration went not to Washington but to Paris and London, which was perceived as a clear signal of a new orientation of Canadian foreign policy. In his speech in France, Carney emphasized that Canada is, in essence, the most European country outside the European continent itself. However, it would be an exaggeration to speak of a complete break between Canada and the United States. The country remains a loyal member of NATO and actively participates in European missions in Ukraine. Nevertheless, the prospect of a trade war with Washington and the desire for closer economic ties with the countries of the European Union are becoming increasingly apparent. At the heart of this strategy is Canada's desire to reduce its over-reliance on its southern neighbor, which still accounts for a significant portion of Canadian exports. Recent trade conflicts with the United States and disagreements over defense spending have only strengthened the desire to diversify economic ties. As Prime Minister Mark Carney stated, in a multipolar world, we must be able to make independent decisions. This thesis reflects Canada's aspiration for greater autonomy on the world stage. The statement, "The US is not the only option," sounded as a clear signal of Canada's possible pivot towards Europe. This turn has become especially relevant after the protectionist policies and tariffs introduced by the Trump administration seriously shook the Canadian economy. The idea of finding alternative markets has received active support in Ottawa. However, the question arises, how can Canada, whose history for centuries has been closely linked to European colonies and whose economy is deeply integrated with the United States along the North-South axis, strive to establish ties across the Atlantic with Brussels? The answer lies in pragmatic politics, not in historical or emotional considerations. First, joining the European Union would provide Canada with full and unhindered access to the vast European market, significantly expanding opportunities for duty-free trade. Second, this will allow the country to emerge from the shadow of the United States in matters of defense and foreign policy, becoming an equal partner in European rearmament projects. Europe, in turn, is interested in forming a new model of alliance in the post-NATO era and is interested in Canada's energy resources and advanced technologies. EU countries have long sought to reduce their dependence on external energy supplies due, in particular, to tensions with Russia. Canada, with its impressive reserves of energy and mineral resources, is an attractive partner for many countries. In this context, the idea of a closer alliance with the European Union is finding increasing resonance in Canadian society. Sociological surveys in recent years have shown a curious picture. From 40 to 50% of respondents see new horizons for the country in a possible entry into the EU. This idea is especially popular among young people and residents of large cities who strive to exchange cultural and political values with Europe. Many Canadians feel a kind of European identity, finding common ground in the desire to build a modern welfare state. However, this idea also has opponents. They fear the loss of sovereignty, point to Canada's geographical distance from Europe, and draw attention to the internal problems facing the EU. Despite the lack of a clear majority of supporters, the very fact that this topic is being actively discussed indicates significant changes in public opinion. But how realistic is the prospect of Canada's membership in the EU? Despite the attractiveness of this idea in theory, there are serious obstacles in practice. Article 49 of the Treaty on European Union clearly defines that only European states can apply for membership. Thus, supporters of this ambitious goal face a difficult task to overcome fundamental legal restrictions. Despite widespread use, the term European identity still does not have a clear definition. In March 2025, the press secretary of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, Paula Pignot, expressed appreciation in connection with the results of surveys in Canada, which showed the attractiveness of the European Union for Canadians. However, referring to Article 49, she noted that Canada's geographical location in North America is an insurmountable obstacle to joining the EU. At the same time, back in 1992, the Commission of the European Communities emphasized that European identity is not limited to geographical boundaries. The Commission document notes that to determine belonging to Europe, it is necessary to take into account the proximity of cultures, common values, historical interaction, and commitment to common ideals. In this context, the Council of Europe is another important benchmark for determining the criteria for membership in the EU. Professor of EU law at Ghent University, Peter van Elsewege, points out that the Council of Europe, open exclusively to European states, serves as a kind of border defining the geographical limits of the European Union. Canada, being outside the European continent, is not a member of the Council of Europe, which raises the question of the possibility of non-European states joining the European Union. History knows examples when countries geographically not located in Europe sought membership in the EU and even became part of it. For example, the Republic of Cyprus, an island state in Western Asia, but with deep cultural and political ties with Europe, became a full member of the EU in 2004. Turkey is also a candidate for membership, although the negotiation process has been indefinitely prolonged. Meanwhile, Morocco, which applied in 1987, was rejected on the grounds of not meeting the criteria of a European country. Experts suggest that one of the key obstacles to EU accession is the lack of membership in the Council of Europe, which distinguishes Morocco and Canada from Cyprus and Turkey. When considering Cyprus's application, the European Commission took into account its significant contribution to European culture and civilization, as well as its strong cultural, political, and economic ties with the European continent, which proved to be a decisive factor in the positive decision. However, the influence of geographical location and historical context in the perception of Turkey as a European country cannot be dismissed. As early as 1963, when an association agreement was concluded between the European Economic Community and Turkey, the possibility of Turkey's future membership in the European Community was already implied. According to Van Elsewij, Southern Cyprus and Turkey represent unique cases that cannot serve as a universal example for considering whether Canada could be classified as a European state under Article 49. Most likely, from a legal standpoint, Canada cannot claim EU membership because it possesses neither cultural, political, nor geographical ties to Europe. Therefore, a hypothetical application by Canada to join the EU would require amendments to the current treaties. At the same time, sociological studies reveal a lack of consensus among Canadians regarding the prospect of joining the European Union. Public opinion is divided, with supporters and opponents of the idea being almost equally represented. According to polls, 44% of Canadians believe that the government should seriously consider EU membership, while 34% oppose the initiative, and 1 in 4 citizens has not yet formed an opinion on the matter. The question of Canada's potential accession to the European Union goes far beyond simply expanding economic ties. It concerns a re-evaluation of Canada's role on the world stage and its strategic priorities in a rapidly changing world. Integration into the EU would open new horizons of influence in international affairs for Canada. Participation in the development and implementation of joint projects with European partners would allow the country to establish itself at the forefront of environmental innovation and technological progress. At the same time, relying on the EU's strong foreign policy and security strategies, Canada could significantly strengthen its position as an influential player on the world stage. Today, as Europe faces growing security challenges and increases its defense capabilities, a unique strategic window of opportunity is opening for Canada. And although NATO membership remains the cornerstone of Canadian security, deepening the alliance with the European Union could be a forward-looking step that meets the country's long-term economic and strategic interests in an era when NATO's role may undergo significant changes. It should also be remembered that Canada is an energy superpower with vast reserves of natural resources. In a context where Europe seeks to strengthen its defense industry and reduce its dependence on Russian energy resources, the potential for Canadian-European cooperation in these areas cannot be overstated. In its energy strategy, Europe relies heavily on liquefied natural gas supplies from the United States, but the political situation in Washington makes these supplies vulnerable. In this situation, Canada is capable of becoming a reliable energy partner for Europe. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly has confirmed that Ottawa is in talks with European partners to deepen cooperation in the defense sector, emphasizing the need for closer coordination on defense procurement. Christian Lupprecht, an expert at the Royal Military College of Canada and Queen's University, notes that in order to strengthen the transatlantic partnership, Canada needs to come up with concrete proposals for Europe. Isolation has always been the biggest risk for Canada. If Europe embarks on a course of independently ensuring its own defense, the need for Canadian participation will decrease. While the U.S. foreign policy course is subject to rapid change, European leaders are taking steps to strengthen the continent's collective defense. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has announced a large-scale mobilization of resources to rearm Europe. Amid geopolitical turbulence and shaky confidence in the inviolability of transatlantic ties, European leaders are looking for new ways to strengthen their own security. French President Emmanuel Macron, while expressing hope for the preservation of allied relations with the United States, emphasized the need for Europe to be prepared for any eventuality. In unison with the French leader, the United Kingdom demonstrates a desire to deepen cooperation within the framework of a new alliance. Prime Minister Kama, in turn, declared the unwavering support of European states for Ukraine. In these circumstances, when the future of NATO appears somewhat uncertain, Europe is turning its attention to finding new security partners. However, the question of Canada's role in the emerging alliance remains open, although the prospects for expanding military cooperation between Canada and European countries are being actively discussed. German politician Rod Rikita particularly noted Canada's strategic importance for Europe, seeing it as a reliable supplier of energy resources. The acquisition of fossil fuels and liquefied natural gas from Canada seems a much more preferable option than importing energy from Russia, making cooperation between Europe and Canada mutually beneficial. However, a serious obstacle stands in the way of strengthening the energy partnership: underdeveloped infrastructure. Canada faces an acute shortage of pipeline capacity and port facilities necessary to significantly increase energy supplies to Europe. Joint investments and financial support from European partners could solve this problem, creating the necessary infrastructure and taking cooperation to a qualitatively new level. Canada is capable of expanding its military presence in Europe, as Analyst notes. One option is to provide Canadian territory as a training ground for European armed forces. In addition, Canada can take on an important role in the production of ammunition and military equipment. The war in Ukraine has clearly demonstrated the need to quickly strengthen the European defense industry. Currently, Europe is actively investing in air and missile defense systems, but ensuring comprehensive protection is a difficult task. In this area, Canada can be a valuable partner, supplying critical minerals and advanced defense technologies. Canada's efforts to strengthen ties with the European Union are not limited to trade and economic cooperation but also include a rethinking of defense strategy. Seeking to reduce dependence on the United States in the military sphere, Canada strives for closer cooperation with the EU and diversification of supply sources. In particular, the Canadian government is considering the possibility of purchasing defense equipment, including fighters, from European manufacturers. Canada is showing interest in European fighters, seeking to strengthen its domestic defense industry and expand production capabilities. Defense Minister Bill Blair announced that alternative options, including the Swedish Saab Gripen, are being considered while not abandoning the current agreement with the United States to purchase F-35s. Saab's proposal includes assembling Gripen aircraft directly in Canada as well as organizing maintenance in the country. Such initiatives are aimed at increasing Canada's economic and strategic independence by diversifying defense procurement. In parallel, the European Union has presented a new security strategy focused on 2030. This strategy calls on EU member states to direct most of their military spending to European suppliers. According to the new rules, at least 65% of EU countries' defense procurement should come from manufacturers from the EU, Norway, or Ukraine. Tensions are rising in the political corridors of Ottawa. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is closely monitoring developments on the European continent. His meetings with French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are not just protocol events but a reflection of deep interest in the future of European security. Canada demonstrates a desire to strengthen cooperation with the European Union in the field of defense, which is in tune with European initiatives to achieve strategic autonomy. In this context, special attention is paid to building balanced relations with the United States. Although Canada does not abandon military cooperation with the United States, it is taking steps to strengthen its own defense industry, focusing on European technologies and developments. Canada's recent decision to purchase radar systems in Australia serves as a clear example of diversifying defense cooperation. This indicates that Ottawa considers not only Europe but also the Indo-Pacific region as an important security partner. This move is seen as part of Canada's broader strategy to rethink its international alliances and create a more balanced system of partnerships. In the future, Canada's accession to the European Union could be a turning point not only for the economic union but also for the entire system of global security and strategic cooperation. This step could change the geopolitical landscape, opening up new opportunities and creating new challenges for all players on the international stage. Despite the fact that geographical location has historically been an insurmountable barrier to joining the European Union, the rapprochement between Canada and Europe could lead to significant changes on the world stage. The strategic steps taken by Canada could herald a new era that will affect the global balance of power. Both Canadians and the world community will closely monitor the roadmap that will be developed in the coming years. Until recently, the question of Canada's accession to the EU seemed so implausible that it was not even taken seriously. However, today this scenario is gaining increasing support in public opinion. Polls is actively discussed in the media and is becoming the subject of behind-the-scenes conversations in political circles. Even if it still seems unlikely in an era of shifting global equilibrium, no scenario can be completely ruled out. So, will Canada be able to break out of the shadow of the United States, cross the Atlantic Ocean and become a member of the European Union, or will geographical and political factors destroy this ambitious dream? This question remains open for discussion and reflection. Join our channel and stay up to date with all the news and updates by turning on notifications. We appreciate every viewer and thank you for your support.